It's hard to forget how
I
much
never
of
really got a
Ethan's story
warning.
on Welcome to Plathville has been shaped by his relationship with Olivia. From the very beginning, the cameras showed us a marriage that looked exciting at first, but quickly became marked by tension, mistrust, and an almost constant battle over control. Olivia had her own way of doing things, her own views about Ethan's strict upbringing, and she never shied away from saying how much she disagreed with the Plath family's rules. For Ethan, who grew up in a sheltered, conservative household, that clash wasn't just between husband and wife, it dragged in his parents, his siblings, and every attempt at holiday dinners or family gatherings. It became a storm he couldn't escape. I remember watching the scenes where Ethan tried to balance Olivia's expectations with his loyalty to his parents, Barry and Kim. He was often stuck in the middle, forced to pick a side, and you could see the toll it took on him. There was that heartbreaking stretch of episodes where Ethan and his mom, Kim, barely spoke. For a boy who had once been so close to his mother, to have that connection severed right on camera, it left viewers shaken. The show didn't hide the pain in his eyes, the way his voice cracked when he talked about wanting peace, but not knowing how to get it. And then came the breakup. Not a clean break, not a private matter, but a messy, very public unraveling. Olivia packed her bags, and the once hopeful marriage turned into a long trail of bitterness. The show highlighted how Ethan admitted this was the first serious relationship he had ever been in, and losing it left him reeling. You could tell he wasn't just losing a partner, he was losing years of effort, memories, and the identity of being a husband. The cameras showed us a man hesitant to even imagine dating again. His guard was up, his smile was forced. He kept his distance, almost like love itself had burned him too badly to touch again. On top of that emotional wreckage, there were the legal battles. In later episodes, Ethan opened up about the frustrating reality that he and Olivia weren't officially divorced yet. Paperwork was hanging over his head, attorneys were mentioned, loose ends that kept pulling him back into the mess he wanted to leave behind. Watching him admit how badly he wanted closure, I couldn't help but feel that knot in my stomach, the way it hurts to see someone chained to a past they're desperate to outgrow. Hi, friends, I'm Sophie, and welcome back to Sister Wives Chapter and Reality Scandals Daily. If you love these breakdowns of the most dramatic reality TV family sagas, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. I want to know, did you feel sympathy for Ethan during those rocky episodes, or do you think he should have handled things differently? For me, watching Ethan in those seasons felt like watching someone drowning in slow motion. He was torn between love and loyalty, trying to satisfy a wife who demanded independence and authenticity, while also aching for a mother's approval. And the truth is, that kind of tug of war leaves scars. It explains why peace has become so precious to him now. Fans care about this because we've seen the cost of conflict. We've seen the quiet boy from Cairo, Georgia grow tired of the fighting, weary of the shouting, and desperate for something as simple as being able to love and be loved without all the noise. This is the baseline for Ethan's story. It's why his next steps matter so much. Because after loss, after control, after watching a family splinter before our eyes, the big question became, could Ethan ever find stability again? Sometimes the biggest changes in life don't start with grand gestures or dramatic speeches. They begin with something as simple as a comment online. And for Ethan Plath, that was exactly how his story with Tegan unfolded. Viewers saw on the show how it all began with motorcycles. Ethan, who has always had a passion for working on bikes and cars, shared something on social media, and out of nowhere, Tegan left a comment. It wasn't flirtatious, it wasn't over the top, it was just about motorcycles. But that little spark, that small acknowledgement of one of Ethan's real passions, turned into the start of something neither of them expected. From there, the connection grew. The show walked us through how the two started messaging back and forth. Nothing heavy at first, just small exchanges, little check-ins. It was innocent and low pressure, which, after everything Ethan had been through, felt refreshing. Tegan wasn't demanding or pushing, she was simply engaging with him about the things he loved. And slowly, almost without him realizing it, those conversations built trust. The big step came when Ethan decided to actually meet her in person. And this is where the logistics showed how serious he was. Tegan lived across state lines, meaning these weren't casual 5-minute hangouts. They were long drives, hours on the road, all for the chance to sit across from someone who gave him a sense of calm. The show highlighted those early dates, and you could see how different Ethan looked. There wasn't the tension we'd seen when he was with Olivia. There wasn't the defensiveness or the walking on eggshells energy. Instead, he looked almost relieved. I think one of the most striking things was hearing Ethan describe it himself. Over and over, he used the same word, peace. He said when he was with Tegan, he felt a peaceful feeling. For a man who had been through constant family battles, marital drama, and years of feeling trapped in conflict, that word carried so much weight. Peace wasn't just a nice quality, it was the very thing he had been starving for. The show also made it clear how different Tegan's presence was compared to Olivia's. With Olivia, Ethan often described feeling criticized or controlled, as if he was constantly under pressure to prove himself or to escape the shadow of his upbringing. Their marriage brought out conflict not only between the two of them, but between entire branches of the Plath family. With Tegan, though, we saw no signs of that kind of dynamic. She wasn't trying to rewrite him or pull him into a war with his parents. Instead, she encouraged his love for family, even visiting his hometown with him and showing respect for his roots. That supportive stance stood in stark contrast to the endless arguments we had all watched play out before. And it's those little things, the comment about motorcycles, the willingness to drive hours just to spend a few quiet moments together, the ease of conversation that gave fans something to hold on to. It wasn't about rushing into big declarations or forcing something to happen. It was about slow, steady steps that actually felt real. For me, watching those early moments was surprisingly emotional, because if you've ever seen someone walk through heartbreak, you know how rare it is for them to open themselves up again. And when Ethan smiled around Tegan, when he admitted he felt peace, it felt like watching someone finally exhale after holding their breath for years. That's why viewers root for second chances. We all know how hard it is to pick yourself up after a painful ending, and seeing Ethan do it with someone who brings out his calm side, it gave people hope. Ethan and Tegan's story didn't start with fireworks or explosions. It started with a motorcycle comment, a message, and a long drive. And yet those small beginnings carried more meaning than any dramatic fight we'd seen before. Because in those quiet details you could see the possibility of healing. And for Ethan, that was everything. If there's one thing reality TV has taught us, it's that meeting the family is never just about introductions. It's a test, a performance, and in the Plath family's case, it's a moment where years of tension, tradition, and loyalty all come crashing together. For Ethan and Tegan, those hometown scenes were some of the most telling parts of their story, because they weren't just about a new girlfriend, they were about whether Ethan could finally bridge the gap between his past and his future. The cameras followed as Ethan drove Tegan through his hometown, pointing out the small markers of his childhood. These weren't flashy city lights or romantic gestures, they were quiet reminders of who he was before the chaos of marriage and conflict. We saw him take her down familiar roads, showing her the spaces that had shaped him. It was the kind of drive that told us Ethan wasn't hiding his past anymore. He wanted Tegan to see where he came from, and that openness mattered. And then came the house visit. Viewers will remember the moment when Kim greeted Ethan and Tegan, and the atmosphere was tense but surprisingly tender. This was the same Kim who had been at the center of so many battles with Olivia, and yet here she was, trying to meet Tegan with cautious acceptance. The show captured the small talk, the nervous laughter, and then the most powerful moment, the quilt. Kim presented Ethan with a quilt she had been working on, a handmade piece filled with the kind of care only a mother can give. Her voice carried a mixture of pride and softness as she handed it over, saying it was something she wanted him to have. That quilt wasn't just fabric on screen, it became a symbol. For viewers, it felt like Kim's way of reminding Ethan that no matter how messy things had gotten, he was still her son. It was a moment that stripped away the arguments and the shouting, and instead spotlighted the love that had always been buried under the conflict. Ethan's quiet gratitude showed us how much that gesture meant. It wasn't about fixing everything in one night, but it was about showing him that family ties were still alive, still worth holding on to. Tegan's role in those scenes also stood out. She didn't overstep or try to dominate the room. She listened, she observed, and she respected the rhythms of the Plath household. The show made sure to highlight how Tegan is already a mother, and Ethan's reaction to that was important. Instead of hesitation, Ethan leaned into it. He openly admitted on camera that he loves kids and hopes to have a big family someday. That acceptance said a lot about where he was emotionally. After years of being caught in a relationship that seemed to shrink his world, here he was, embracing a partner whose life was already fuller, more complicated. And he welcomed it. And the family noticed. Kim and Barry's responses on screen were cautious but not dismissive. There wasn't the wall of tension that we'd seen when Olivia was around. Instead, you could sense they were watching Ethan closely, trying to read if this woman brought out the best in him. And to many viewers, it looked like she did. When you compare this to how other siblings introduced partners, the differences are striking. Think back to how Moriah's choices in love were often met with skepticism, or how Micah's independence pulled him far from home. Younger siblings often got side-eye or judgment, but with Ethan this introduction carried a more serious weight. He wasn't a teenager experimenting, he was a man rebuilding. That quilt scene, those drives through the town, those moments of family acceptance, they were all tests, and for once it seemed Ethan had found someone who passed without sparking new battles. As a viewer, I couldn't help but feel the tension ease just a little. For once, instead of explosive confrontations, the family scenes gave us a glimpse of healing. And in a show that thrives on drama, that peace was powerful. Peace never lasts long in the Plath family. Even when things start to look calm, the show always finds its way back to the fire, literally. The campfire scene will go down as one of those classic Plathville moments where buried grudges erupted in front of everyone. What began as a family gathering quickly spiraled into an
I never
argument.
really got a warning.
Voices raised, frustration spilled out, and suddenly the old wounds that had been simmering in the background came roaring back into focus. For Ethan and Tegan, who were just starting to carve out a quiet rhythm together, it was a crash course in what it means to love someone in the middle of this family's storm. The cameras didn't shy away from showing how uncomfortable Ethan looked, sitting in the glow of the fire as relatives hashed out their differences. For Tegan, who was still relatively new to all of this, it was a raw introduction to what being with Ethan truly meant. Family drama wasn't optional, it was unavoidable. You could see the nervous glances, the tight body language as if she was bracing herself for what she had stepped into. And then came the conversations about relationships, specifically Zach and Lydia's engagement. The family divided quickly. Some questioned whether the engagement was too rushed, while others defended it. Micah and Moriah, always unafraid to speak their minds, voiced concerns about whether people were truly ready for lifelong commitments. That tension didn't just stay focused on Zach and Lydia, it became another reminder of how divided the family remains when it comes to love, loyalty, and independence. For Ethan, these moments are doubly difficult. On one hand, he knows the sting of moving too quickly into a serious relationship. His marriage to Olivia was proof of how easily things can crumble under pressure. On the other hand, he doesn't want to be the brother who tears down someone else's happiness. Watching him in these scenes, you can tell he's weighing every word, trying not to ignite another feud. And hovering in the background is Tegan, quietly witnessing how this family operates. Passion, judgment, and love all mixed together. Never clean, never easy. What makes this so challenging is that Ethan has to navigate loyalty in two directions. His mother Kim is right there, carrying years of unresolved issues. His siblings are split, sometimes pulling him in opposite directions. And beside him sits Tegan, a new partner who has brought him peace, but who is now seeing firsthand the exact chaos that once drove Olivia to war with the family. For viewers, it was impossible not to wonder, would this new relationship buckle under the weight of Plath drama? Or was Tegan's calm exactly what Ethan needed to withstand it? From my perspective, these campfire and engagement scenes highlight a pattern the show has hammered on for years. In this family, love always comes with a test. There's the test of control versus freedom, the test of loyalty versus autonomy, the test of whether you can keep your own peace while still being part of a group that thrives on conflict. And I'll be honest, sitting at home watching Ethan navigate it again, I felt torn for him. Because we've seen what happens when he caves to the pressure. We've seen him lose his voice, his joy, and his connection to family. The difference now is that he has Tegan by his side. And the question is, will that peace she brings be enough to help him stand strong when the flames rise? Even as Ethan moves forward with Tegan, the show reminds us that the past isn't neatly tied off. On camera, we see the practical holdovers of his marriage to Olivia, unfinished divorce paperwork, attorney consultations, and the uneasy acknowledgement that legal loose ends can weigh heavily on new beginnings. Those moments strip away the romance and show the reality. You can't fully step into a new chapter when the old one isn't closed. The series also frames Ethan's next steps less as dramatic gestures and more as choices about boundaries. Who gets a say in his relationship? How much influence should family hold? By drawing that line, Ethan defines what peace actually means on screen, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of stability. For viewers, it feels like the show is asking whether Ethan can finally balance love, family, and independence on his own terms. Looking back over Ethan's journey, what stands out most isn't just the shift from Olivia to Tegan, or even the tug of war with his family. It's the way the show makes us sit with the reality of rebuilding when life doesn't go the way you thought it would. Ethan has had to navigate divorce papers, old grudges, and siblings who can't agree on what love should look like. Yet on screen, what emerges isn't chaos. It's a quiet determination to choose peace, even when the cost is high. Tegan brings a sense of calm, and together they're learning what stability really means in a family where conflict has always been front and center. For viewers, it's a reminder that healing is messy, boundaries are hard, and second chances deserve grace. Watching Ethan, we're invited to think about our own definitions of loyalty, closure, and love. I'd love to hear what you think. Has Ethan truly found the peace he's been searching for? Drop your take in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Sister Wives Chapter. Let me know which Plathville moment you want me to unpack next. The most powerful shift inside the Plath family wasn't loud, wasn't explosive, and didn't come with a dramatic confrontation between mother and daughter. It came with a quiet recentering, an invisible realignment of loyalty. And that recentering wasn't toward Kim anymore. It was toward the siblings. Lydia Plath, once the dutiful defender of her mother's rule, began to redirect her energy, her compassion, and her loyalty toward the very brothers and sisters Kim had spent years painting as rebellious. That choice, subtle, understated, and never publicly declared, was what truly broke Kim's grip. On screen, the change revealed itself in small moments, the kinds of exchanges you might miss if you weren't looking closely. When Mariah opened up about her struggles with their mother, Lydia didn't scold her. She didn't remind her to be obedient or to trust Mom's heart. Instead, she listened. She softened. Her tone shifted from defense to empathy. The Lydia who once acted like Kim's shield began to act like her sister's safe place. That was a profound shift, because in a family where Kim's control relied on pitting loyalty to her against loyalty to siblings, Lydia stopped playing the middle. She started leaning toward her siblings. The same dynamic unfolded with Ethan. For years, Ethan's open rebellion against Kim and Barry created a wall between him and the rest of the family. He was the eldest son who'd gone astray, the one Kim cast as a cautionary tale. But when Lydia began reaching out, she wasn't just offering him prayer. She was offering him presence. She could listen without judgment, support him without filtering his feelings back through her mother's authority. For Ethan, that meant reconciliation wasn't just possible, it was safe. And for Lydia, it meant stepping out of the role of her mother's enforcer and stepping into the role of sister. Then there was Micah. His departure had been framed as another act of defiance, leaving home, pursuing modeling, embracing a life beyond Kim's rigid standards. Kim treated his independence like abandonment, but Lydia's interactions with him revealed something else: understanding. She didn't shame him. She didn't drag him back into the fold. Instead, she met him where he was, affirming his journey while still holding space for her faith and values. That balance spoke volumes. It showed that Lydia's loyalty was no longer chained to her mother's narrative. She could embrace her siblings as they were, not as Kim demanded they be. Piece by piece, These small choices created something far more powerful than Kim's authority ever had: solidarity. For the first time, the Plath children were finding unity, not around their mother's rules, but around each other. And the irony is devastating, because Kim had spent years warning them that independence and disobedience would destroy their family. But in reality, it was Kim's own rigid grip that fractured them. Once Lydia loosened her ties to her mother and tightened her bonds with her siblings, the family began to experience something Kim had promised but never truly delivered: connection. For Kim, this was a nightmare. Her power had never been purely about rules, it was about loyalty. So long as Lydia stood by her side, Kim could wield Lydia as proof, as leverage, as a weapon against criticism. Look at Lydia, she proves my way works. But the moment Lydia stopped offering that unwavering loyalty, the entire house of cards collapsed. Without Lydia, Kim couldn't dismiss Mariah as the problem child, Ethan as the wayward son, or Micah as the selfish one. Because now, Lydia, the very one she had paraded as her perfect child, was showing compassion toward those same siblings. That shattered the contrast Kim relied on. What unfolded in front of viewers was something remarkable: a family rewriting its loyalty map in real time. Where once obedience to Kim equaled love, now solidarity with siblings equaled survival. Lydia, by leaning toward her siblings, gave them something they hadn't had before: a bridge. Her presence told them, "You're not crazy, you're not wrong, you're still part of this family, even if mom says otherwise." That validation was priceless, and it turned the tide of the family's story. And let's not miss the emotional weight here. For Lydia, choosing her siblings didn't mean she stopped loving her mother. It meant she started loving differently, loving in a way that wasn't bound to control. She found a way to affirm her brothers and sisters without betraying her own values, a way to choose compassion over performance. That shift transformed her role entirely. She was no longer the perfect child propping up Kim's control. She became the quiet force recentering the family around each other, rather than around their mother's authority. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Kim grew weaker, more defensive, clinging to old tools of power that no longer worked. The children grew stronger, finding strength in their bonds with one another. And at the center of that rebalancing was Lydia, not loud, not rebellious, but steady in her silence, steady in her quiet shift toward loyalty that mattered more. Which leaves us with the question that pulls this whole story forward. If sibling loyalty can grow stronger than parental authority, what happens when that bond becomes the new foundation of the Plath family? And what does it mean for Kim, now stripped of her final anchor? For years, Kim Plath thrived on one certainty: that no matter how many of her children rebelled, one daughter would always stand as her proof of success. Lydia was the anchor, the visible reminder that obedience still lived inside the family. But the moment Lydia's silence replaced her defenses, Kim's certainty cracked. And once that crack appeared, Kim's control began to collapse in ways even she couldn't contain. On screen, you can sense Kim struggling to make sense of it. She sits across from her children, repeating old refrains about rules, about boundaries, about the way she believes they should live. But instead of her words carrying weight, they hang in the air unanswered. Ethan doesn't nod, Mariah doesn't back down, Micah doesn't flinch. And Lydia no longer rushes in to smooth things over or reinforce her mother's perspective. That absence speaks louder than any rebellion. Kim finds herself explaining, pleading even, trying to frame her authority as reasonable, but without Lydia echoing her. The arguments feel hollow. Kim had always been the enforcer, the parent who built the rules and carried them out with precision. No sugar, no TV, no outside influences. For years she wielded that control like armor, but what viewers began to see in later seasons was how brittle that armor had become. Her once proud confidence gave way to defensiveness, to contradictions, to moments where she couldn't quite explain why the old system wasn't holding. She would say her children were confused or influenced, but those labels lost their sting when even Lydia stopped echoing them. And then there was Barry. Unlike Kim, Barry rarely raised his voice. His stance was quieter, less forceful. But as Kim's grip weakened, his presence took on new weight. Viewers saw him questioning, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to show that even he no longer stood as Kim's automatic ally. He admitted to past mistakes. He acknowledged how rigid their rules had been. In subtle moments, Barry represented the very opposite of Kim's response. While she doubled down, he reflected. While she demanded, he hesitated. His quiet stance didn't rescue Kim's authority. It highlighted how much of it had been built on her, and how shaky it was without him propping it up. The emotional toll on Kim was visible. This was a woman who had once commanded the household with certainty, who had believed her strictness was love, who had raised her children under the banner of absolute trust in her way. To see her children question her, to see them leave, to see Lydia no longer shield her, it stripped away not just her authority, but her identity. She wasn't the matriarch holding the family together anymore. She was the parent struggling to justify why the very children she raised in obedience wanted distance from her control. The shift wasn't dramatic in the sense of a single explosive scene. It was slow, grinding, a kind of erosion. Each child stepping away took a piece of Kim's authority with them. Ethan's independence, Mariah's rebellion, Micah's career, Olivia's refusal to bend, and finally Lydia's silence. Without Lydia, Kim's entire argument fell apart. If even the daughter she held up as the perfect example wasn't willing to publicly defend her anymore, what evidence did she have left? For the audience, this collapse played out with a mix of shock and inevitability. We had seen Kim stand unshakable in earlier seasons, convinced her system worked. And now, on screen, we watched her flail, reaching for the same arguments, finding them powerless. It was the unraveling of a persona, the breaking of a narrative she had crafted for decades. And this brings us to the suspense that keeps the story alive. Has Kim lost the one thing that made her powerful? Without Lydia's visible loyalty, can Kim still call herself the center of this family, or has her reign finally reached its end? Retention booster line: the collapse of control isn't always a bang, it's a slow silence that leaves you wondering what will break next. The most shocking part of Lydia's story isn't a public confrontation or a dramatic argument caught on camera, it's the quietness of it. It's the subtle, almost invisible ways she began to claim her own life while still living under the same roof as her mother, the one who had long defined her. Unwelcome to Plathville, viewers could see Lydia taking small steps that might have seemed ordinary at first glance, but in reality, each one was an act of quiet defiance. She started with moments that weren't broadcast for drama, they were private but meaningful, choosing to spend time with her siblings without immediately reporting back to Kim, listening to Ethan or Mariah's perspectives without filtering them through her mother's expectations, sitting quietly in conversations where once she would have interjected to defend Kim. It was as though she had discovered a new language, a way to exist within the family while also standing apart. These were small, almost imperceptible acts, but for Lydia they were revolutionary. The beauty and the tension of Lydia's growth was that it didn't look like rebellion. She didn't scream, she didn't storm out of rooms, and she didn't stage confrontations. She simply chose herself in moments when the family expected her to automatically choose Kim. A glance here, a decision there, a refusal to weigh in on an argument that no longer needed her voice to validate it. These quiet decisions slowly shifted the balance of power. Kim's authority no longer had a constant defender, and the house began to feel different. Comparing Lydia's journey to her siblings' louder exits is striking. Ethan moved out and built a life completely independent from the Plath household. Mariah often voiced her frustrations openly, sometimes painfully, in ways that created obvious tension on screen. Micah followed his own path with a clear break from family rules. Lydia, however, took a path that was almost invisible at first, a slow realignment of loyalty, a gentle redirection of her energy toward her own sense of self. While the audience could see Mariah walking away in anger and Ethan leaving with determination, Lydia's approach taught a different lesson: that freedom doesn't always have to look dramatic. Her subtle choices also had a profound emotional impact on the family dynamic. Kim could no longer rely on Lydia's constant affirmation. The children began to trust each other more, confiding in each other and making decisions without needing maternal approval. This created an atmosphere where autonomy became normalized rather than feared. The house transformed quietly, from a structure of control to a space where personal choice began to take root. Lydia's example showed that the courage to be oneself doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes the most powerful acts of freedom happen in silence. On-screen moments reinforced this subtle power. Viewers witnessed Lydia laughing with Mariah during shared activities, exchanging honest conversations with Ethan without guilt or apology, or helping Micah make decisions while resisting the urge to immediately consult Kim. These acts weren't about defiance for the camera, they were about choosing peace, choosing integrity, choosing a life that was hers. The camera may have captured small gestures, but the implications were massive. The moral center of the family was shifting away from rigid authority toward empathy, trust, and mutual respect. The emotional resonance of Lydia's quiet independence is what truly hooks the audience. Fans who followed her every move could feel the tension in her eyes, the weight she carried, and the liberation in her small choices. It was relatable in a way loud arguments never could be. Viewers realize that maturity often isn't a spectacle, it's making decisions that honor yourself, even if no one notices immediately. The slow accumulation of these choices changed the household in ways that drama alone could never achieve. While Lydia's path was understated, it was deeply strategic. She redefined her loyalty on her own terms. Rather than abandoning her family entirely or joining in on conflicts, she became a steady presence that no longer reinforced the old power structure. The shift was profound. Kim's authority weakened not because Lydia openly defied her, but because she quietly reclaimed her autonomy. Every small act of independence chipped away at the system Kim had built for decades. Viewers could finally see that freedom doesn't always come with a loud announcement. Sometimes it's a quiet, deliberate act, choosing a conversation, choosing a relationship, choosing your own values over inherited expectations. Lydia's journey illustrates that the most transformative resistance can happen in silence, and the most enduring change doesn't always need confrontation, it only needs consistency and courage. By the end of this act, the audience understands the paradox of Lydia's strength. She has become a force not through drama, but through careful, intentional choices that gradually reshape her world. Watching her navigate this subtle revolution teaches an important lesson. True autonomy is often invisible to the outside world, yet its effects ripple through every relationship and every dynamic around it. Retention booster line: sometimes the loudest revolutions happen in silence, and the smallest choices hold the greatest power. The quiet revolution Lydia started didn't just affect her, it rippled across the entire Plath family, changing how loyalty, trust, and love were understood in ways viewers could finally see unfold on Welcome to Plathville. For years, loyalty in the Plath household had been simple in theory, but impossible in practice. It meant obedience. It meant choosing Kim's rules above personal
I
feelings,
never really
above
got a warning.
friendships, above even basic understanding of yourself. Lydia had long been the standard bearer for this kind of loyalty, the shining example that her mother could point to. Look, this is how a child honors the family. But as Lydia stepped back, everything began to shift. Siblings who once hesitated to speak up, who feared Kim's judgment or scrutiny, started to find their own voice and each other. Maria's boldness, Ethan's independence, and Micah's measured defiance suddenly had a safe space to exist alongside Lydia's quiet reclamation of self. The old system, which relied on one child modeling perfect obedience, could no longer hold the family together in the way Kim had imagined. The pivot point was simple: when the model for control chooses herself instead of the rules, everything changes. On-screen moments make this transformation clear. Lydia can be seen laughing with Mariah over shared memories, confiding in Ethan without worry of reprisal, or helping Micah navigate challenges while resisting the urge to seek approval from Kim first. Each interaction is small, almost mundane, but carries a profound emotional weight. They are moments of choice, of alignment, of sibling love taking precedence over imposed authority. The family dynamic slowly moves away from fear and obligation toward understanding and care. Reflecting on early seasons, the contrast is stark. Loyalty then was a straight line: do as Kim says, defend the rules, and uphold the family image at all costs. Defiance was punished not always through words, but through disapproval, coldness, or emotional withdrawal. Children who faltered or questioned, like Ethan and Mariah, were often made examples of, and their departures felt like fractures in a house built on rigid expectations. Lydia's role as the obedient daughter had been the glue, the proof that Kim's vision could be realized. Without her constant compliance, the foundation begins to shift, revealing cracks in the system that were always there but never so visible. Now loyalty looks different. It's not about rules or who follows whom. It's about empathy, respect, and mutual trust. Lydia and her siblings begin to support one another in real ways without needing to perform for an authority figure. Olivia and Micah feel the freedom to express themselves without fearing that Lydia will immediately report or judge. Ethan and Mariah find that Lydia's presence doesn't police them but instead encourages honest connection. The moral gravity of the household moves away from Kim's control toward the children themselves. The lesson is undeniable. Loyalty that grows from care is far stronger than loyalty rooted in fear. The emotional impact is powerful. Viewers can sense how relationships deepen when the hierarchy of obedience is replaced by authentic connection. Lydia's silence, which once seemed like withdrawal, now functions as a bridge. She no longer carries the burden of maintaining family unity under Kim's rules. Instead, she shares the weight with her siblings. They begin to see her as an ally rather than an enforcer. The family narrative, the story that once revolved around Kim's authority and the example of one perfect child, transforms into a network of mutual respect, support, and understanding. One of the most striking shifts is how the siblings' decisions are now validated by each other, not just by Kim. Ethan's choices, which were often criticized, are met with understanding. Mariah's assertiveness is accepted, even appreciated. Micah is supported rather than policed. Lydia's quiet presence provides stability without coercion, showing that a family can be cohesive even when obedience is not demanded. Loyalty no longer requires sacrifice of self, it demands only presence, empathy, and honesty. This evolution challenges viewers to reflect on what family loyalty really means. The early seasons presented a rigid top-down definition: follow, obey, protect the image, respect the rules. The current dynamic, however, demonstrates that true loyalty grows from compassion, understanding, and acceptance. The Plath children now navigate relationships with intention, building bonds that survive disagreement, mistakes, and even moments of anger. The difference is profound. Authority is no longer synonymous with moral correctness, and obedience is no longer the measure of love. The emotional storytelling here is crucial. Every glance, every shared laugh, every quiet act of support between Lydia and her siblings shows that the family can be whole without the old system of control. The viewers feel the relief, the validation, and sometimes the heartache, knowing how much tension existed before and how far they've come. It's a testament to the resilience of sibling bonds and the quiet power of personal integrity. Kim's attempts to reclaim her previous authority often fall flat in this new context. Without Lydia as the visible model of obedience, her criticisms no longer carry the weight they once did. Barry's quieter role as mediator and observer also becomes more noticeable, though he often stays in the background. The camera captures moments of Kim's struggle, but the audience can see that the family's moral and emotional center has migrated. It no longer revolves around control, it revolves around care, autonomy, and choice. Retention booster line: true loyalty isn't about following rules, it's about standing together, even when you choose yourself first. By the end of this act, it's clear that the Plath family has been fundamentally reshaped. Lydia's quiet acts of self-sovereignty, combined with her siblings' growth, demonstrate that family strength does not come from fear or obedience, but from shared understanding and compassion. What once felt like a rigid system of control now functions as a community where choices matter, voices are heard, and bonds are nurtured. The narrative of the perfect child no longer dominates. Instead, the family story is written collectively, and the audience is left reflecting on how subtle shifts in behavior can redefine what it means to love and support one another. Lydia's journey on Welcome to Plathville may not have been loud or explosive, but its impact has been undeniable. What started as subtle withdrawal and quiet hesitation transformed into a force that reshaped her family entirely. Over the seasons, we've watched her evolve from the perfect child, the one who carried the weight of her mother's expectations, into someone who simply chose herself, and in that choice, altered everything around her. Kim's authority, once seemingly unshakable, began to crack the moment Lydia stopped performing her role.
every small act of quiet resistance, staying neutral in conflicts, refusing to enforce her mother's rules, or simply setting boundaries, shifted the household dynamic. Kim's attempts to maintain control became less effective because the anchor of her power, Lydia's loyalty, was no longer tethered to her expectations. For the first time, the family no longer revolved around obedience, but around understanding and mutual support. Barry's presence as a calmer influence may have softened tensions, but it was Lydia's silence that truly spoke volumes. Meanwhile, Lydia's siblings experienced freedom in a way they hadn't before. Ethan, Moriah, Micah, Olivia, and the younger children discovered that they could rely on one another instead of constantly seeking approval from Kim. Bonds that were once secondary to parental authority grew into the foundation of the family's new dynamic. Lydia's quiet support allowed them to flourish in ways her vocal opposition never could have. Her silence became a shield, a space where trust could grow without the weight of judgment. The emotional weight of this journey is powerful. Lydia's transformation reminds viewers that influence doesn't always come from confrontation or loud defiance. Sometimes, the most profound changes occur through the subtle assertion of self, the refusal to perform for someone else's expectations. By choosing herself, Lydia revealed that power is not about control but about alignment, honesty, and inner strength. The family structure, once so rigid, has shifted in a way that highlights resilience, compassion, and personal autonomy. Reflecting on the early seasons, it's remarkable to see how far things have come. Loyalty, once defined by blind obedience to Kim, is now redefined by empathy, respect, and genuine connection. Lydia's actions have not only reshaped her relationships with her siblings, but also illustrated a broader lesson. No matter how strong someone's authority may seem, it cannot endure if one person refuses to participate in the system of control. Silence, in this case, proved far more powerful than confrontation. As viewers, this story invites us to consider our own lives. How often do we follow rules and expectations out of obligation rather than choice? Where have we allowed external pressures to dictate our relationships and personal decisions? Lydia's quiet revolution encourages reflection on boundaries, family dynamics, and the strength it takes to stand firm without drama or spectacle. And yet, the story leaves us with a lingering question: what does the future hold for Lydia? Her silence has spoken, her loyalty has been redefined, and her power lies in autonomy rather than compliance. Will she continue to navigate life quietly but decisively, or will new challenges test the balance she's fought so hard to achieve? The path ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear: her influence will continue to shape the Plath family for years to come. Thank you for joining me today to explore Lydia's journey and the profound shifts within the Plath family. I'm Maya Rose, and this has been Sister Wives Chapter. If you've been captivated by Lydia's story and want to see more in-depth commentary on your favorite reality TV moments, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear how you interpret Lydia's quiet rebellion and what it teaches about family, loyalty, and choosing yourself. What do you think will happen next for Lydia? Could her silence inspire other siblings to claim their independence, or will Kim find a way to regain some control? Let me know your predictions in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest episodes and analysis. The story isn't over, and the next chapter in the Plath family drama is just around the corner. Retention booster line: sometimes the loudest power isn't spoken, it's held in quiet, unshakable resolve. Lydia's story reminds us that real change doesn't need fireworks. It's in the choices we make, the boundaries we hold, and the courage to prioritize our own voice over the expectations of others. As the Plaths continue to navigate their evolving family dynamic, one thing remains certain: when silence is chosen wisely, it can speak louder than any words, shatter control, and open the door to true freedom.